What if a 16th century astrologer wrote verses that seemed to echo the headlines of 2025? Nostradamus' cryptic quatrains have sparked debates for centuries, with some claiming he predicted everything from global wars to asteroid threats and deadly plagues. Are these genuine warnings or just mirrors of our modern anxieties? One quatrain even hints the Russia-Ukraine war could shift in 2025. Could centuries-old words really reveal tomorrow's headlines? To figure that out, we need to look at the man behind the mystery and why his words still grab our attention today. Welcome to the Hex of History, the channel where the past gets weird, the facts get dark, and the truth is stranger than myth. Nostradamus, the man behind the mystery. Nostradamus wasn't just a mysterious figure from the past. He was a real person with a career that spanned both science and the supernatural. Born Michel de Nostradamus in 1503 in France, he started out as a physician. That alone was unusual in an age where medicine and astrology often went hand in hand, but Nostradamus took it a step further. After years treating patients and living through the chaos of plague and war, he began to blend his observations of the world around him with astrological calculations, a common practice during the Renaissance, but one that set the stage for his lasting fame. In 1555, he published Les Prophéties, nearly 1,000 four-line verses packed with cryptic imagery. These quatrains are what made Nostradamus a household name. Instead of spelling out predictions in plain French, he wrapped his ideas in layers of metaphor and symbolism, words like Gallic brass or references to the crescent moon. The results? Verses that could mean almost anything to anyone. This ambiguity is a big part of why people keep returning to his work, especially when the world feels unstable. So, why did he write this way? Part of it comes down to survival. Nostradamus lived in a time when Europe was in constant turmoil. The plague was everywhere. Religious tensions ran high, and wars seemed never-ending. Speaking too plainly about the future, especially if it involved the downfall of powerful people, could be risky. By keeping his predictions vague, he protected himself and gave his words a timeless quality that still sparks debate today. The other reason for all the mystery is that Nostradamus' themes were the same ones that kept his contemporaries up at night: war, disease, famine, and disaster. His quatrains are filled with these anxieties, and that's part of why they still resonate. When you read about armies exhausted by long wars or cities burning under the sky, it's easy to see the echoes of current events. That's probably why, every time the world faces a crisis, his name pops up again. Over the centuries, people have credited Nostradamus with predicting everything, from the rise of Napoleon to the 9/11 attacks. Take the often quoted line, "The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city." Supporters say that's about New York, but skeptics point out that new city could mean almost anywhere, and the rest is just poetic license. This is the tricky part. His writing is so open-ended that it's almost a Rorschach test for our fears and hopes. And that brings us to his supposed predictions for 2025. The debate over whether Nostradamus was a true prophet or just a clever poet continues, especially as people look for answers in uncertain times. Whether you believe he saw the future or just captured the mood of his own era, his quatrains keep getting reinterpreted to fit the latest headlines. One of the most talked about examples is a quatrain that some say points to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Does it really predict what will happen next? Or are we just seeing what we want to see? That's the question we'll tackle as we look at this controversial verse. A war to end all wars? Nostradamus and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The idea that Nostradamus may have written about a major turning point in the Russia-Ukraine conflict has gained traction, especially with one particular quatrain that's been making the rounds. The verse reads, "Through long war, all the army exhausted, so that they do not find money for the soldiers. Instead of gold or silver, they will coin leather, Gallic brass, and the crescent sign of the moon." At first glance, it's a jumble of strange images, leather coins, brass and moons, but it's exactly this kind of cryptic language that keeps people guessing. Let's talk about why this quatrain has people connecting it to 2025 and the Russia-Ukraine war. The line about armies being exhausted feels pretty on the nose. After years of fighting, both Russia and Ukraine are facing real strain. Soldiers worn out, supplies running low, and budgets stretched to the breaking point. The phrase, "so that they could not find money for the soldiers," takes that exhaustion a step further, hinting at an economic crisis so deep that even paying troops becomes a struggle. That's where coin leather comes in. Nobody's actually minting leather coins, but the idea is clear. When you can't afford gold or silver, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. According to the Hindustan Times, this is seen as a symbol of economic collapse or desperation, a reflection of what happens when war drags on too long and resources dry up. Now, about those mysterious references to Gallic brass and the crescent sign of the moon. Here's where things get interesting. The Hindustan Times points out that Gallic brass is often interpreted as a nod to France, while the crescent sign of the moon is linked to Turkey, whose flag features a crescent moon. The speculation goes like this: if these countries get involved, maybe as mediators or power brokers, they could play a key role in how the conflict ends. France has been vocal about the need for a settlement, and Turkey's unique position between East and West has kept it in the diplomatic spotlight. But as always with Nostradamus, you could just as easily argue that these symbols mean something entirely different, or nothing at all. That brings us to the big question. Are we really seeing predictions, or just reading our own anxieties into old poetry? Skeptics say that Nostradamus' quatrains are so open-ended that you can fit almost any major conflict into them if you try hard enough. When you're looking at a verse after the fact, it's easy to cherry-pick details that line up with modern events, especially when the world feels uncertain and everyone's searching for answers. Still, it's hard to deny that these quatrains capture a certain mood. The image of exhausted armies and economic collapse isn't just about one war. It taps into a universal fear that comes up whenever times get tough. And maybe that's why, every time a new crisis hits, Nostradamus' words come back into the spotlight, whether you see them as genuine prophecies or just clever poetry. They force us to confront the idea that history keeps repeating itself in new and unsettling ways. Of course, war and money troubles aren't the only things Nostradamus warned us about. There's another set of predictions that hit even closer to home. One's about deadly diseases and threats from the sky. Plagues, asteroids, and the fragility of humanity. Nostradamus warned of both a returning plague and a great fire from the sky, often linked to an asteroid event in 2025. Let's start with the plague, since that one feels a little too familiar these days. One of his quatrains is said to foresee an ancient plague in the UK, echoing past outbreaks there. After living through COVID-19, it's hard not to notice how quickly people latch onto this kind of prophecy. The idea of an old disease making a comeback, maybe something like smallpox, or even a new superbug that laughs at antibiotics, hits a nerve. It's not just about germs either. The background research points out that these fears are amplified by the kind of political and economic instability that's already making headlines. When hospitals get overwhelmed and governments are distracted, it's easy to imagine how a health crisis could spiral out of control. That's the scenario Nostradamus' supporters point to: a fragile system, a sudden outbreak, and a society already stretched thin. England gets singled out a lot in Nostradamus' work, and there's a reason for that. Historically, the country was hammered by plague outbreaks, especially when things were already going badly, like during political chaos or economic downturns. So when people today read about an ancient plague targeting the UK, it doesn't sound so far-fetched. Throw in the current worries about healthcare, public trust, and even climate-related disease risks, and you've got a recipe for why this prophecy keeps popping up in the news. There's no proof that Nostradamus actually predicted a specific modern disease, but the way the quatrain lines up with what people are already worried about makes it stick. Now on to the Great Fire from the Sky. This is where things get a little more dramatic. Some researchers, including those cited by the Hindustan Times, have flagged Nostradamus' writings as hinting at a possible asteroid collision or close pass in 2025. It's that kind of thing that sounds like the plot of a blockbuster movie, but it taps into a real primal fear. The idea that something big and unexpected could come crashing down and change everything. NASA actually tracks hundreds of near-Earth asteroids every year, and while most pass by harmlessly, just knowing they're out there is enough to make people uneasy. Scientists say the odds of a catastrophic impact are extremely low, but that hasn't stopped prophecy fans from connecting the dots. The phrase "Great Fire from the Sky" is vague enough to mean almost anything, but the image of an asteroid fits our modern sense of cosmic vulnerability. What's interesting is how these kinds of predictions seem to resurface whenever the world feels especially shaky. Disease outbreaks, economic trouble, and even the threat of something falling from space. They all play into the same old anxieties. Nostradamus didn't just write about disasters. He managed to capture the things people have always worried about in words that can be twisted to fit almost any crisis. So why do these centuries-old prophecies still grab our attention every time the news gets grim? Maybe it's not about whether Nostradamus was right or wrong, but about how his words echo what we're already feeling. The real mystery isn't just in the predictions themselves, but in why we keep turning to them when the future feels uncertain. Why Nostradamus still haunts us. There's something about Nostradamus that keeps pulling us back in, even centuries after he scribbled his last quatrain. We crave order in chaos, and Nostradamus' foggy verses act like mile markers on an uncharted road. When the world feels unpredictable, wars on the horizon, new diseases making headlines, his words seem to offer a hint of structure, even if it's just an illusion. The lack of details isn't a flaw. It's the feature that lets us fill in the blanks with our own worries. The real secret to his staying power is how open-ended his writing is. Nostradamus didn't bother with specifics. He left behind a pile of cryptic four-liners that can be bent to fit just about any situation, past or present. That's why every time something big happens, people go back and look for a quatrain that fits. Take the example of 9/11. After the attacks, a lot of attention landed on the quatrain about the sky will burn at 45 degrees, Great News City. It wasn't a prediction anyone flagged ahead of time, but after the fact, it was easy to make the connection. That's a textbook case of confirmation bias, zeroing in on the bits that seem to match and ignoring everything else. This pattern repeats itself with every new crisis. If you look at Nostradamus' most infamous themes, two stand out: war and disease. He wrote about exhausted armies, burning cities, and ancient plagues. Those anxieties haven't changed much over the centuries. Every time a new war breaks out or a strange illness spreads, his verses pop up in the news or on social media. It's not because he had a crystal ball, but because he captured the same universal fears that headline writers are still using today. It's almost like Nostradamus built his own feedback loop. The more we look for answers in his quatrains, the more we find, because we're the ones doing the heavy lifting. Interpreting his verses gives us a sense of control, like we're piecing together a puzzle that might show us what's coming next. That feeling is especially powerful when the world feels unstable. If we can't fit the present into his prophecies, maybe we can get a handle on what's around the corner. In the end, Nostradamus' hold on us isn't really about whether he got the future right. It's about the comfort we get from trying to make sense of things, even if the map is more like a Rorschach test than a set of directions. His words stick around because they give us just enough shape to our fears that we can pretend for a moment that the chaos is a little less random. That's the real draw. His prophecies become a mirror for what we're already feeling, not a window into what's actually coming. And with so many uncertainties ahead, it's no wonder we keep reaching for those old riddles, hoping they'll tell us something new. Conclusion: Nostradamus' predictions don't really tell us what's coming next. They just shine a light on the worries we're already carrying around. His quatrains, with their open-ended lines about war, disease, and disaster, are less about the future and more about the anxieties that never seem to change. Maybe that's why his words feel so relevant, even now. Which of Nostradamus' 2025 prophecies do you find most convincing, or just the most interesting? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and hit subscribe if you want more deep dives into history's biggest mysteries. Will history judge Nostradamus a visionary? Or will 2025 reveal our need for prophecy over precision? Thanks for wandering the strange with us. This is Hex of History, where history doesn't repeat, it lingers.